So, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all the viewers of the live. A very good evening to one and all, and welcome to this amazing session being conducted by the student organization Aurora under the aegis of Division of Student Welfare at Lovely Professional University. We all heartily welcome to this amazing session, and yes, well, I can see still a lot of people are joining the live. Harshdeep, Kushal Sharma, Rahul, Rohit, Harshit, hi, Iram, Jahan, hi, Abhishek, hello, how are you? Yes. Um, People are quite enthusiastic about today's session. Aryan Jain just joined. Hello, Aryan, how are you doing? Akshat, hello. Yes, that seems you guys are quite enthusiastic about the session today. So, without any further ado, let's hop into the session. And I guess you are all aware of the topic we're about to discuss regarding the EMI calculator, building using the web programming languages. I mean, by the end of the session, you will be able to build your own EMI calculator using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and so languages, and that would be really helpful. I guess a lot of people are still working and a lot of people are interested in web development and using web developing languages and all. So this might be a informative and knowledge based session for all of you, and we hope so that it could help you all. And anyone in the comment section, please mention who's going to be our mentor for today. Are you aware of the mentor? I mean, you might have known the madam already. Okay, I told madam. So, any name, please, in the comment box. Yes, I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Yes, Amit, you're excited to learn from Srishti, ma'am. Yes, you're absolutely right, Amrit. We are going to be having Mrs. Srishti Gupta, ma'am, as our mentor for the day. She's been a developer already, and she worked as a grad mentor, and she's a subject matter expert. So, welcome, ma'am, onto the virtual stage, please.
Hey Sriram, thank you so much for a lovely introduction and
Thank you.
welcome to all of you who have actually joined this session. I'm really excited to just interact with you on a one-on-one basis. Let me know if you've got any doubts or comments, right? So just put them in the comment box and I'll be more than happy to answer all of your queries. So today's session, as you already know, it's all about building your own EMI calculator. And without any further delay, let me just first show you what exactly it looks like. That's what will actually make you get excited about it, right? So let me first present my screen. And
Okay, while the ma'am presenting the screen, you all remember to be stay calm and not to spam the chat box. Make the session live and interactive. Keep all your questions. And yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
sure, so I hope that you're able to see my screen. Just put yes in the comment box so that I get to know that, okay, my screen is visible to all of you. I think a couple of yes would be good enough. Yeah, I think I got the answer. All right, so this is the EMI calculator that you'll be building, right? So basically, let me just walk you through different components of this calculator so that you get a sense of exactly what we are going to build today. And then we'll go into what are the technology stacks that you will be using, right? And how exactly go about building one. So here you got a couple of inputs, right? So one is the loan amount, which is basically the principal, the tenure, which is basically the time period, and the rate of interest, which needs to be provided in order to calculate what should be the equated monthly installments, which is basically the acronym for that is EMI, right? So here you got some sliders wherein the user can actually go ahead and just drag the slider in order to update the loan amount. So here you see that the loan amount is getting decreased, and that's I mean, if you move to the right side, so that's when it gets increased, right? The tenure is also something that you can decrement as well as increment, and the similar thing happens for the interest rate. And here you get to see a beautiful chart which basically displays the breakup for the principal amount as well as the interest amount, and this is where you get to see what is the total EMI which needs to be calculated. Now, for this session itself, we'll start with building this particular piece, which you see on the left-hand side, which is the crux of building all the logic about how to calculate the EMI, how to make these beautiful sliders in place, and how to display. Like you can also see that on the basis of the slider is where this input box is getting its value from, right? So if you update the slider, the input box basically shows an updated value to you. And the similar thing happens with all the three sliders for principal, tenure, and interest rate, right? So this is actually the crux, and that's what we'll start building. And then, if time permits, we'll also go into the chart section, seeing how exactly we can have a pictorial representation of what's going on the left side, right? So just to give you a sense of what exactly we'll be starting off with, this is something which we'll be building in the first, I mean, as an initial milestone, right? So here also you have got the same thing. It's just that a color combination would be different, and then the tenure, and similarly the interest rate, and depending on that, you get to see the EMI, which is to be paid at each month, right? Okay. So now in order to build this, what exactly do you need? So I mean, we'll just be going ahead with HTML, JavaScript. We'll not be using any UI library for this purpose. However, because I already understand that a lot of you would already be familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So instead of CSS, we'll instead be using a CSS preprocessor known as SAS. Okay, and I'll show you, and I'll teach you how exactly are we using different concepts of SAS. Although not a lot of concepts would be applicable here, but yeah, definitely there are a lot of advantages of using a CSS preprocessor over vanilla CSS, right? So that is what we'll be using, and just a couple of things which I want to put forth is that basically we'll not be going too much into the theoretical discussion of each and every concept, because I'm assuming that those are the concepts that you would already be familiar with. So we'll not be going into a lot of depth of like the differences between different properties. I'll definitely be explaining to you what we are writing and why we are writing that particular line of code, right? But it will be more on the practical side rather than on the theoretical side, right? So that's the aim. And our eventual goal is to actually first like just achieve our milestone one, and if time permits, also go into the secondary milestone, which is to show the graph, right? So let's get started. And just a disclaimer that we'll be starting from the very first step, right? So we'll not be having any starter code in place, and we'll be just creating everything from scratch, and then finally we'll be getting to this beautiful EMI calculator at the end, right? So before even getting to like coding, the first thing which we need to really understand is what exactly is the problem statement. Definitely, I've seen how it looks like and how it behaves, but it's also very important to just break down the problem into multiple sub problems, and then try to solve for each sub problem in order to eventually solve the bigger problem at hand, right? So here is where you can actually get to see. I hope this is also visible. Yeah, I can see that it is. So here is where you can see the entire code for the EMI calculator, which I had been showing to you over here, right? And here, let's read what exactly the problem statement says, so that you all have a better picture of just getting to know the problem beforehand, and without even getting into code, right? Right. So, yeah, I mean, this is something which you're all familiar with, right? So the loan amount, which basically is this amount, right? So this is something which is the principal. The tenure is basically the time period, and interest rate is the rate of interest that is supposed to be there. And if you all could recall, like, what exactly did you study about the simple interest and the compound interest? So you would recall that simple interest is nothing but principal into rate into time divided by 100, right? So, and for the purpose of this application, although EMIs would rather be calculated on compound interest, but in order to keep the application very simple and not really focus on the formulas side a lot, but rather focus on how to build this particular application and apply the proper logic, we'll be taking into consideration the simple interest instead of compound interest. So these are the app screenshots which we'll be skipping for now, because we've already seen how the app looks like, right? And just in case you were wondering what is the formula for calculating simple interest, so this is what I told you about. So this is basically nothing but principal into rate into time divided by 100, or you simply multiply it by 0.01, right? And the next thing is, like, how exactly do you calculate the EMI, which is the equated monthly installment? So once you have the total interest in place, which is the simple interest, you add principal amount to it in order to calculate the amount which needs to be given at the end of a particular time period, right? And EMI is nothing but that particular amount which you need to pay divided by the number of months for the given tenure. So if the time period is 2 years, right? So in those 2 years, there'll be actually 24 months, and because you have to pay the EMI every month, so for those 24 months is what you will be calculating, that what do I need to pay, which corresponds to the principal as well as the total interest, right? So I hope this is clear. Just let me know in the comments box if this is not clear, because this eventually is the crux of the entire logic that we'll be putting into place. So if anybody has any problem with this, just let me know in the comment box. Okay, so Divya has asked, like, what's the difference between the simple interest and the compound one? So if you know, like, the compound is simple is very straightforward, like given a principal amount, uh, that particular rate of interest which you're trying to apply will be calculated on the principal amount. Whereas in the compound interest, what will happen is, like, you will be getting intermediate amounts in between. So for example, for the first year, the principal is, let's say, 100 rupees, and the rate of interest is, let's say, 10%, and this is like compounding. Okay, so after 1 year you actually have to pay 110 as the amount, right? Because 10% is the rate of interest that you have to pay. So for that 1 year, it will be 110, which is basically the principal, which is 100 rupees, plus 10% of 100, which is 10 rupees, right? So 110. But in the second year, let's say if you're taking that loan for 2 years on a compound interest basis, so that means on 110 rupees, you'll then have to pay 10%, right? Whereas in the simple interest, this doesn't really happen. It's just one principal amount basis which you'll be calculating the simple interest. And in terms of formula, it's just, I mean, the formula definitely is different for the compound interest, right? So that's something that you can basically, first, let's just go ahead with simple interest so that it's like really understandable for all of you, because it's just about the formula, right? You can just uh, you can just take out the simple interest formula and just plug into it the compound interest formula, and things will just behave the same way, right? So yeah, I think I hope that answers your question, Divya. And apart from this, you can definitely Google more about how compound interest works. All right. So I think, yeah, these are the typical points that I wanted to discuss with respect to the logic. And there are a couple of points which are definitely there, right? If time permits, I'll also explain to you what debouncing is and how exactly are we doing range validation, input validations. That is something which is not included in milestone one. So just to set the expectations very clear. However, if you're interested to learn more about it, this is the GitHub repo which I have made public. So you can definitely come back here, see what all are the different highlights of this particular project, and then you can also see the attached code with it. And if time permits, we are definitely going to cover that, right? And yeah, just a couple of instructions to run the project, which we are not going to do because anyways, we are going to start from scratch. All right, so let's get started. I hope this is also visible. Yeah, it is. So here you can see that I've got uh, a basic folder, right? So this is nothing but just an empty folder, and it has been opened into Visual Studio Code. So just to set the rest of the expectations correct, so I just want you to focus more on what I'm writing, and definitely ask a lot of questions in the comment box. I'll try to answer as much as possible, right? So I'll take some 15-20 minutes. After every 15-20 minutes, we'll take a short break wherein I can just go through all the comments and then answer as much as possible. However, if there is any comment which is left out, you can definitely connect with me on different not a lot of social media platforms, but yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I hope I'll be able to answer all of the questions in this session itself. But if not, you can ask me your queries over there, and I'll be more than happy to answer. Right. Apart from that, as I mentioned, do not focus more on just simultaneously coding this application out, because we don't have a lot of time, and it may be possible, given my speed and given that you have to switch in those windows, you may be left behind, and then things will start breaking, and you may not understand a lot of things. So just try to focus on just understanding what is being written out there in terms of what is this particular line of code is doing, why are we writing this. So ask more questions on those fronts, and I'll be happy to answer them. Right. So as I said, we'll be starting from we'll be starting from scratch because I've seen people really facing challenges with respect to setting up a lot of things. So we'll be setting up things, and then we'll be bit by bit developing the EMI calculator, right? So as you got to see, I have an empty folder being opened here. Visual Studio Code is just one text editor that I prefer using. You can have any other text editor of your preference. Apart from this, there's one more thing which needs to be installed. So I would want that Node should be installed in your machine. If it is not installed already, you can just Google out, right? So download Node. Okay. And here, let me just expand this, right? So here you will basically get to see different options, wherein based on your operating system, you can just download that particular installer, and then it's just simple installation of how you install other applications out there, right? So when Node is installed and you also have a text editor of your choice, that's when you get into this, right? Right. All right. So the first step that we'll be doing is basically that we'll be creating an index.html file. Okay. So that is something which I hope that a lot of you would already know what an index.html file does, right? So it basically renders all the different components that you have, all the different elements that you want on the DOM tree, right? So we'll not go a lot into depth of what exactly DOM tree is, how is a DOM tree constructed, what is CRP, and all of those things. But rather, I'll just be typing the different elements, and you can just ask me queries on the same, right? So here, what I'm trying to do is I'm using Emmet. Emmet is basically, you can say that it's kind of an inbuilt extension which comes with a lot of text editors these days, and it basically provides different shortcuts in order to just speed up you writing code in HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, right? So I just, if you could see, I just typed the exclamation mark and then pressed enter, and this actually gave me the base structure of the HTML document, right? So if you have downloaded Visual Studio Code and you try using this, definitely you'll be able to replicate the same thing that I just did over here. And a couple of things which we would discuss for this particular HTML document, which are not really so important, but let's just quickly understand them. So this is basically the versioning of HTML. This just typically represents that we are using HTML5. There are different versions of HTML out there. So this doc type represents that we are using HTML5. Right? The language that we are using is English, and the head tag is basically, it will consist of all the meta tags and all the things which the user isn't really able to see on the screen, right? So whatever the user gets to see is basically to be written inside the body tag. So meta tags is basically the tags which help in search engine optimization. You can read more about how search engine optimization works and how you can provide different structured tags, meta tags, and things like that, right? So we'll not go too much into depth, but yeah, this is the character encoding. So we say that UTF-8 is what they're using. If you know from, if you know about ASCII, so this is like an extension of on top of it, right? So whatever character that you're typing inside this code editor and how it's getting converted into binary representation, that's what it basically is all about. And then this is something which you can skip if you're not using Internet Explorer, right? So it just basically tells what is the rendering engine that you should be using, and that button that appears, right? What is the browser compatibility that you should choose? So it basically just avoids that. Meta name viewport is basically all about what is the width that should be taken. So it basically says that whatever is the width of the device that you are using, that is the width that you choose. And the initial scale is basically the zooming level. So for example, on your phones, right, when you're maybe going through some picture of yours, right, so you try to zoom in just to see maybe the background or something, right? So that is something that we are setting right in the beginning, that the zoom level should be 1.0. So uh, there should be no zoom in or zoom out which should be applicable. And then here the title, basically what is the title that you get to see over here. So let's say that because we are making an EMI calculator, right? So the title will be EMI calculator. Okay. And now what I need to do is I basically need to see whether this is getting displayed on my browser or not. For that, let's just say that we are building an EMI calculator. Okay. And let's see if this gets rendered on to my browser. So this is one cool extension which you all can download. Okay. So here, if I go to my installed extensions, it's taking a bit of time. Okay. So yeah, preview on web server. Okay, so you just search for this extension, preview on web server. I'll tell you what exactly it does. So once you have installed this extension, just go back to your index.html file, okay, or whichever HTML file that you would be having in your application, and just click on launch a web server. Okay, so here you get to see this, right? So for example, now what this web server is doing is it's basically not taking the file from the file explorer, but rather it's it's just deploying a local server, which is the local host. And on top of that, it's trying to render this index.html page. Okay. So, for you, if you don't understand how the back of these things are working, it's just enough to understand that this is just going to show the display on the browser. Okay. That's all it is about. And if at all you make some updates over here in the index.html file, you'll get to see them instantly over here without having to refresh your page. So this is the overall advantage of using uh, the the extension that I told you about, right? I guess it was preview on web server. Yes, so it's preview on web server. Okay, so going back now, because as I mentioned in the beginning that we'll not be using pure CSS, but rather we'll be using Sass. Now, let's first see like what exactly, how exactly would we inject a pure CSS into our HTML file, and then just get to see how exactly Sass is different from CSS. Okay, so let's say that first let's just create an let's create an index.css file. Okay, and what I will do here is I'll put a link tag. Let me just minimize it so that you have a better view. This is the maximum I can go, right? And here I will say index.css. Now inside the index.css, I'm just trying to play around with how exactly you would write code, right? So I'll select the body element, the body tag, and I'll say that the background color, let's make it yellow. It's some random color. So okay. So another advantage of using preview on web server is that once you save the CSS code, that just automatically gets reflected over here, right? So here the background color has been applied. Now, how exactly are we doing it? We are basically using an external style sheet. External style sheet basically means, I think you all will be familiar with this, but just to refresh things for those who would have studied it long time ago or wouldn't have studied it at all, right? So index.css, because it's a separate file altogether in which we have written our styles. So that's why we call it an external style sheet, because all the CSS code is coming from an external file, and this is how you just link your style sheet to your HTML page. Okay, so here you basically give the path in the href. Okay, and this again, as I mentioned, using a meta is like pretty much cool. You just type link and it just gives you the entire element auto populated with different attributes, right? So this is what I did. Dot, if you are already familiar, this is like the relative path which is being followed. So inside the current folder, basically go to the index.css file, right? So this is what it is doing. Now, let me try to create an SCSS file. So basically for Sass, there are two different extensions that you can follow. It can either be SASS or it can be SCSS. we'll be going ahead with SCSS, and the difference, I mean, the difference between both of them is basically all about the syntax itself. Okay. So let me say that, let's say it's main.scss, which I'm creating. Okay. And here also, what I'll try to do is I'll say that the background color, maybe, so this, all of this is not really related to the EMI calculator, but it's really important to understand how to set up things. Okay. So let's say that it's green. Okay. And now when I go back to my index.html file and I say that, rather, instead of taking index.css, take main.scss. Okay. And you will see that it's not really taking these styles, although the path that we've mentioned is correct, the file name that we've mentioned is correct, and even the code that we've written inside it is pretty much similar to what we have written in index.css. It's just that the color changes, right? Why is it happening so? Because what we are using is actually a CSS preprocessor, and the browser does not understand the CSS preprocessor as such. So it basically wants a CSS file only, which has all the transpiled CSS code. Okay, so what we need to do is we need a mechanism wherein we can convert this HCSS file into CSS file. Now, you might be wondering, like, if I had to convert my SCSS into CSS only, why exactly am I using SCSS in the first place? Why not just go ahead with CSS? So there are a lot of advantages of using a CSS preprocessor. It basically gives you a lot of functionalities. If I have to talk about SAS, then it gives you functions, mixins, it gives you variables to work with. You can write uh, those conditional statements inside your SAS files, which is not really the case when you're using plain CSS. Some of those advantages we are going to see as we will be building the EMI calculator app, right? So for now, just understand that SCSS is far more, has got far richer capabilities in comparison to CSS. Now, how exactly do we set it up, right? So for that, what we need to do is we basically need to convert this into a node project. Okay. Now, why do we need to convert it into a node project is something that I'll just tell you in a while. But first, let's just assume that we need to convert it into a node project. Okay. And how exactly do we do that? So if you have not really gotten a chance to visit this terminal, so let me just click on this hide. Yeah, I hope you are able to see this, right? I hope the font size is fine. So yeah, Visual Studio Code and a lot of text editors these days have integrated terminals. So that means if at all you're using something like this, maybe terminal or iTerm, or on Windows, I'm not really, I don't remember command prompt, right? So yeah, so basically this has got the integrated terminal with itself, and you can basically use this one right here. So in order to convert any project into a node project, and that's why I said in the beginning you need to have node installed, what you need to do is you need to just say npm init and take all the default options. So npm init is Node Package Manager, is something which comes pre-installed when we are installing Node, and it basically helps you just install different packages into your project. Okay, we will see one such package in action, and that's when you will get to know why exactly do we need npm in the first place. And it is basically initializing this particular project, which is the EMI calculator, like whichever path you are inside, you want it to be initialized as a node project. And hyphen y is basically a flag which is to be used in order to tell that, okay, whatever the default questions that you may be asking me, like what should be the version of this project, what should be, who should be the author, and things like that. So just take all the default values, okay, and you'll see what exactly default actually means. So if I just press enter, okay, these are the default values which have been picked up. If I wouldn't have provided hyphen y, this is something that you should actually, after this session, go ahead and do it by yourself. Don't put hyphen y and just get to see different questions which are being asked, like what should be the name of the project. Then you get an option to type what should be the name of this project, right? Otherwise it will just pick whatever the name of the directory is. In this case, our name of the directory was EMI calculator, and hence it just picked that as the name. So yeah, not going into a lot of details into this particular thing. So yeah, when you are creating a node project, or when you are initializing a particular application as a node project, So what you get to do, what you get to see is a package.json file which is being created. Now inside this package.json file, all the defaults which we had provided earlier are basically there. What is the name of the application? What is the version? Version is typically the one that is very, very helpful when you are publishing a package. So for example, when you see an app in the app store, you basically also get to see what is the current version of this app store, right? So different updates will go along with the versions when it is being published. Now, what is the description of the application? Let's leave it empty for now. What is the main file, which is the index.js? We'll be creating this in a while. And the different scripts. The scripts are basically the commands that can be used, okay? And the keywords related to this application, who is the author and the license, okay? So this is something which is like really important for us. And there is one more thing which will be important, which we'll just see in a while, okay? So as I told you earlier, let's just clear this. Okay. So right. As I told you earlier that we'll be installing one particular package using Node Package Manager, and this is where you'll get to see why do we know why do we need this npm. The first thing that we did was to initialize this as a Node project. The second thing that we'll be doing is to actually install a particular package which will be helpful to create our SCSS file into CSS files. So that thing, right? So I'll say npm install. This is the command which is to be used to install a particular package, and the package that we are going to install in this case is SAS. Okay, so let me just press enter. Maybe it will take a while to just install this package, right? And meanwhile, what we will do is, right, so it has installed this particular package, and let's just see like what exactly this script is doing. Okay, so instead of doing this, let me just say hello world. Okay, as I said, scripts are basically scripts is the section where you get to see different commands, and if you run this particular command, it basically says that this is the key, and if this command is run, then just execute whatever is written over here. Okay, so let me give you a demo of this. So if I say npm run test, npm run is something that you have to write, and after that you just write the name of the command that the name of the script basically that you want to run. And what it will do is it will just replace this npm run test with this particular thing. So that means it will just run this particular command. It will execute this. So let's just press enter and see what it does. So it basically just executed this particular command in the terminal, right? And then what is the output for this particular command? It just says that, okay, print hello world onto the terminal. And that's why you get to see hello world. Okay. So in a nutshell, this scripts will basically consist of different commands that you can run. And this is the section that we are going to utilize in order to tell SAS package that, okay, this is my folder where all my SCSS files reside. And you basically need to convert and bundle all of them together into one particular CSS file, this particular converted CSS file is then I'm going to import in my HTML. Let's see how that works. Okay, so yeah, I'll just clear this out so that you have better visibility. Now what I will do is let me just copy this script. Okay, just hold on a second. Right. Okay, so I will just say that, okay, this is my command. So if I say npm run scss, what it will internally do is it will just run this particular command. Now what this command is doing is, in fact, we should be having SAS over here. So we are saying that run the SAS package and just tell the package to watch my scss files. I'll tell you what exactly watch means. Just wait for some time. Okay, so we'll go through what watch exactly means in the demo. So we are saying that run the SAS package and take the main.scss file inside scss folder, and then convert it into main.css file inside the CSS folder. So now what it is going to do is it will convert the entire main.scss file into main.css file, and this main.css file is what we can utilize in our HTML document, in our HTML file. So because we have these folders in place, so let's also just say SCSS. These folders are something which is at your discretion. You can name them whatever you want, right? So it's not like you have to name them in this way itself. So I just have an SCSS folder, and inside this, let me just drag my main.scss file over here. Okay, so this main.scss file, if you remember, it just has the previous code which we had written to apply green background color to the body tag. Okay, now I just save my package.json file and I say npm run scss. Okay, so this is the command that we are running. Npm run is the prefix that you will be using, and then I press enter. Okay, so now if you see, the CSS folder was not really present earlier, right? So it has the CSS file which basically has the code that we wanted, right? So whatever code we had written inside SCSS, maybe I also had, let's say, a color of white. Okay, so now if I just save this file, see here that right now you just have background color. Okay, and once I save this SCSS file, I pressed save, it just recompiled this back. It recompiled it again to main.css, and now if you go ahead and see main.css, you'll actually see the white color over there, right? Now we know that, okay, there is a mechanism wherein we can convert our SCSS files into CSS files. Now what do we need to do? As we discussed like a couple of times, let me just hide this. Okay, so as we discussed a couple of times, we just need to uh, give a path to our CSS file, to our compiled CSS file, right? So I'll say CSS slash main.css. Okay, so if you see, basically we are trying to access this CSS folder, and inside this we are trying to access the main.css file. And now you see, like, beautifully it has picked up the right styles. Our SCSS file is actually working correctly. So if you have got any confusion, let me just remove this index.css file because we no longer need it. And let me just go back to main.css file. Let's just make it blue. Okay. And once I just save it, you get to see the colors being applied. I think so far we have just covered how to exactly do we set up the conversion process basically from SCSS to CSS. Okay, right. So now what we need to do is we basically can, so if at all you are aware of version control systems, we will not really go ahead and we'll not go into depth with that, right? So we are basically using Git as the version control system in this case. We may not be doing a lot of commits, but yeah, this is something that you should be using. And git ignore is basically the file which just tells Git, which is the version control system, to not track these particular files. Okay, so we will be saying that, okay, DSS store is something which is specific to Mac operating system, so folder which is specific to Mac operating system. Node modules is something that we want Git to skip. Okay, just don't pay a lot of attention to this particular thing because this is anyways not related to the EMI calculator. So even if you don't really go ahead and make this file, things will still work perfectly fine. Okay, this is just for you to understand that, okay, this also exists, and maybe you can play around with version control systems. Okay, and config, basically we need to add this particular config, prettier RC. So I also have another extension installed in my system which is prettier RC. It basically just takes the entire headache of just beautifying the code. So for example, let's say um, mm, maybe I just have a blank space over here. Okay, once I save it, it basically will just automatically put it back to its place, and I don't really have to take care of indentation, code beautification, things like that. So that extension, like, it's really really popular, right? Yeah, Prettier. This is the one that I'm talking about. Okay, so just search for Prettier and then just install it. A lot of developers out there are using this particular extension. It's really famous. And VS Code, basically all the files which are related to VS Code, right? So that is also something that we need to ignore. Again, talking about this file is like solely it's just for you to know that if at all you already don't know about it, that version control system is something that you can use. How to use it is something that I would just leave it up to you. You can Google it. There are plenty of good resources out there on YouTube, as well as at other places just available for free. Just check them out and see how exactly this works. Okay, right. So now we have set up everything. Okay, now I will tell you like why exactly did we go ahead and created this SCSS folder. Okay, so we have a couple of base setup already there. Okay, so let me just go ahead and grab that. Okay, so inside SCSS, like, I mean, this is all about how exactly do you want your project to have an architecture. So inside SCSS, we typically have different folders, and those folders will be having like definite meanings to them. So for example, I'll create an abstracts folder, and inside this abstracts folder, I'll basically be having my variables.scss file. Okay, so abstracts, I mean all the variables, and I also talked about mixins. That is something that we'll not be using in this particular application, but that's uh, a really good advantage of using CSS preprocessors such as SAS, right? So, and one of the bigger advantages is also that we can define our own variables. Now, for example, had you been using pure CSS, if you are already aware of using pure CSS, if let's say you are using um, red color at multiple places. Okay, so for example, you have like 10 different elements, and on all those 10 elements, you somehow have to use this red color. So every time you'll have to say that okay, this color is red. This you'll have to basically replicate that particular red value 10 times in different elements. Okay, whereas in variables, like you do in any other programming language, when you define constants, so if at all you have to update that particular value, let's say tomorrow I need to change my application from red to yellow. So now with pure CSS, you'll actually have to go to all those 10 places, change from the value red to yellow, which is very tedious process. It's not really consistent, and it's making the code redundant also. So that's when variables come into picture, like in any other programming language also. Like you have defined a variable at one place, that variable's value is something that you use. Okay, and in future, let's say if you want to update from red to, let's say, yellow, you just have to go to that particular variable. Just at one place you have to update the value to yellow, and then at all other places, because anyways you are using the variable, whatever value it has, it will be picked automatically. This is something that we'll see. Okay, and yeah, I think I also told you about this thing, right? That we'll be discussing about the watch flag. So watch flag was nothing but once you make these changes, which I think I already showed, just I forgot to mention that this is what watch is doing. Let's say it's actually black. Okay, so as soon as I press Command S, which is the shortcut to save this particular file, you'll see that my CSS, I mean the SCSS files were being recompiled. So that is what Watch is doing. It basically says that, okay, whenever you encounter any change in this particular file, just recompile everything back to CSS. Okay, so this is what Watch was doing. Yeah. Just let me know if at all I forget to cover something, right? I think that will be really grateful of all of you. Let me just see if there's any comment for me out there in the comment section. I think we don't really have any comment. I do see one question. What was that command to install? If at all you were talking about how do we initiate a project as node project? So it was npm init hyphen hyphen y, and if it is about how to install the SAS package, right? So it's npm install SAS, SASS. So I don't see any more comments. Sure. So let's go ahead. Okay, so we also see a comment. Why are we using multiple SCSS? Let's just go ahead and see why exactly are we doing that. Okay, so that's something we are yet to cover. Right. So I have a couple of variables already set up for you, because we don't really have so much of time that I'll be taking you through all of those variables, right? But I will just paste them over here and we'll go through them, because the entire purpose of this workshop is for you to understand how to set up things from scratch, and how why exactly are we doing this particular way, and what are the different advantages of doing so, right? So these are the different colors that I have defined because it is a variables file, right? So, okay, you may also be wondering what this underscore basically means. So this underscore is basically there to just tell SAS that this is a partial file. When I say partial, it's basically saying that this is not having any CSS code as such. This file is the one that will be used at multiple places in order to render CSS code. So if you see here, there are no tag selectors or ID selectors or what do you call class selectors that we are using. There are no pseudo elements or pseudo classes as such. We are just purely defining different variables which we are going to reuse at multiple places, right? So for example, for colors, and this is the syntax for defining a variable in SCSS. So you basically have to prepend your variable name with a dollar sign, right? And then after a colon, just provided the value that you want to provide. So color primary, we are saying that this is this bluish color, right? The secondary color is basically some purplish color. The black color, basically different hex codes for defining different colors, right? Which we'll be reusing. Then the font family base. So, I mean, if you are just getting confused about okay, this should be actually font family, just note that we are not doing something like this. We are not saying something like this, right? So I'm not writing a CSS rule over here. We are just defining a variable, and variable is something that you can define according to your own understanding, and I mean, why, whatever value that you want to choose, right? So if I just have to say font family, let's say Srishti, this is also valid, right? Because it's just a variable in the end. It's not a CSS rule. So there are no CSS properties that are being used. And that's the reason why I mentioned that it's a partial file, because there are no CSS rules that we are defining here. That's because we have that being reused at multiple places. So let's keep it font family base, right? Yeah. And this is the font family that we are using. So basically it takes Open Sans, and if that's not available, it will take Helvetica and so on in down in the hierarchy, right? If none of the fonts are available, it will basically go ahead and pick sans serif. So that's about fonts. I think you already know this if you know CSS. The breakpoints, I don't think we are actually going to use this, but yeah, let me just show you one example. So basically, when you are writing responsive CSS code, right? So this is when you can actually go ahead and use breakpoints, wherein you just define that, okay, my small device actually starts from 480 pixels, my medium devices start from this pixel. So these are the different, uh, I mean, the width breakpoints that you would define for different devices out there. Okay, and here is where there is a potential to actually use mixin. Take this as a homework and then just go ahead and see how exactly do you use mixins in order to define different breakpoints to utilize media queries. Maybe a big sentence for you. Definitely who would be understanding, they'll not find it very difficult. But yeah, the question is all about how do you use uh, a mixin in SAS to define the media queries. Okay, and this is where the breakpoints will be helpful. Okay, so let me just go ahead and delete this because we are anyways not going to use this. Transition, I mean, we are defining a variable for transition saying that transition out all the properties. This all basically corresponds to that. Not going into a lot of details of this CSS, right? And 1 second is the transition delay, and this is, I guess, the transition timing function, which basically says that, okay, take a linear transition. Okay, this is something that we'll be using, and I'll tell you how this is working. Border radius, if you know that there is exists a CSS property called border radius, so for that, we are defining a variable that this is the border radius that you should be using. And then the box shadow, which we'll be using at multiple places. This is, if you just check the syntax of box shadow, you will get to see that this is the X offset, Y offset. This, I think, is what blur radius, and then this is the color that we need to provide. So as I mentioned, the purpose of this session, because I know that a lot of you would already be familiar with HTML, CSS, and this is not going to be a theoretical session, right? It's all about being practical. So, right. So I think I told you the syntax, right? You can search more about these CSS properties later on. Let's just go ahead and define other folders. And I also remember that there was a question that why are we defining multiple SCSS files? This is where you'll get to see. Okay, so let me go ahead and define another folder, which I say as the base. And this is typically the architecture that you will be following when using SCSS. So SCSS typically has 7 folders and then one file to rule them all. And these 7 folders, not really necessary that all the applications out there will be using those 7 folders. It basically depends on the requirements of your application. So for this particular use case, inside the base folder, we'll be having a reset file. Okay. So a reset file will basically consist of just the resets that we want to provide. Okay. So if you know that if you know a little bit about CSS, you know that in every browser there's a user agent style sheet, which basically applies some CSS properties by default. Okay, so for example, when you had seen this, right, this EMI. So this EMI, we had just written it inside an H1 tag. Now, if you inspect this, let me tell you what I mean by user agent style sheet. Okay, so if I inspect this, right? So here is where you get to see this user agent style sheet, right? Now, do you think that I had given all these properties to the H1 tag? No, we never gave anything of that sort. We just specified what the background color was for the body tag and what the color is. But how exactly are these styles being picked up? So that is what the user agent style sheet will provide. So every browser will have some default styles which will be applied to different HTML elements out there which you will be using. And if you want to override those styles, that's what the entire purpose of CSS is, right? So we want to make things beautiful. And instead of just going ahead with user agent style sheet, we provide our own styles so that we can just display things in our own way, right? So this is what reset is also doing. It's just saying that instead of picking up the default styles provided by the user agent style sheet of the browser, apply these styles instead. Okay, so this, if you have learned about CSS, so this basically is the all selector. It will select all the elements in the HTML document, and you are basically saying that you basically say that, okay, reset all the margins that an element has, all the padding, and the box sizing should be border box. So if you know box model, you will basically understand that this is something which basically just calculates the padding inside the width of the element, right? So the default value is actually content box. So learn, I think you already would know about this property, but yeah, just I would really suggest you to go through different CSS properties being used in this particular session. If at all you don't know about any of these properties, okay, and if you don't know about maybe some of those properties, it's okay, just move on. For this particular session, just try to understand how things are working. I'll definitely be explaining a bit about things, but yeah, not really going into the theoretical details of each and every property out there, right? And just take this as an opportunity that, okay, I learned all of these CSS properties, CSS rules today, but maybe I don't know, let's say 10 of them or 20 of them. So just take this as an opportunity to go and Google them out later after this session. Okay, so you'll actually be learning a lot that way. So that's also how I got to learn about a lot of CSS properties. So that, going through different code snippets out there and just getting to see that, okay, this is a new CSS rule that I haven't studied or haven't known before. So let me just Google it out. What's the syntax? How to use it? A great learning that way. Okay. So right. So the other research that we are providing is that we are saying that, okay, the HTML body should be having the height of 100 view height. 100 view height is basically a CSS. What do I say? It's basically a unit. A unit to a CSS unit, right? Which basically says that 100% of the visible view height. Okay. So for example, let me just close this. So this is what is being visible to you, right? So this entire 100% is what is to be considered as the height. So that's what this is all about. Let me just see, and yeah, I think you'll not get to see the changes right now because we don't really have content over here, right? And similarly for the body also, the margin should be 0. I think this is redundant because we have already defined margin for all elements over here, right? Then the A tag, I don't think we are using A tag as such, but yeah, when you are using A tags, so the reset would be that because you don't want those underlines. So if you have seen the linked tags, right, the anchor tags basically, you would get to see them blue colored and then there is an underline. And once it is clicked, it becomes purple, right? So there is a lot of text decoration which happens based on different uh, uh, pseudo classes like hover and active, right? So that is something that you just say that, okay, don't have any such styles applied to my anchor tags. I myself want to pick them up. Okay, so that's when you say that text decoration should be none. UL, again, I don't think we are using in this application, but yeah, this is typically a very small reset file which you can use in a lot of projects out there. So UL is basically an unordered list, and when you have an unordered list, you basically get to see different circles. So for example, when you're writing those bullet points, right? So each bullet that you see is basically the one that you will get to see when you are using a UL tag. When you don't want those bullets to be applied, that is when you provide this property that, okay, don't display any bullet for me. Okay, so yeah, and this is something that we will get to see basically when we are I think I'll just show it to you. Yeah, so here what we are doing is we are using input type as number. Okay, and when you are using input type number, you basically get to see the two arrows over here. If I just go ahead and show it to you, right? Let's see if we get an MDN link. Yeah, so MDN is like the go-to place. Okay, so this is something that you should always refer to when you are learning about different HTML or CSS or JavaScript related things, right? So yeah, so basically you get to see this arrow, right? Okay, and here if you go, although even though this is an input type number, but you don't get to see these arrows over here, which you get to see here. I hope this is kind of visible. Okay, so this arrow is what I'm talking about. So in order to remove those arrows, these are the resets that you will be applying. WebKit is basically, I mean, these are the vendor prefixes that you will be using for different browsers, right? So this, for example, Mozilla is basically for Firefox. Okay, so right. So these are the resets that you have applied. Okay, and let me also go ahead and add one more file, which is typography dot SCSS. Okay, so inside typography, it's like very simple. Okay, in on border, now this is where you get to see an example why we had defined the variables file. So in order to answer the question which somebody had just asked, right? I don't remember your name, I'm really sorry, but yeah, you had asked basically why we are creating different files, right? So here what you are trying to do is you are trying to access a particular variable. So let's say font family base. So tomorrow, what you want to do is you want to change this to, let's say, some other font, right? So you don't have to really come over here and change it over here also, because anyways you're using a variable. This is just uh, this variable is just being used at one place, but with colors you'll get to see that they are being used at hundreds of places, and that's why it's really impossible to like just go ahead and change it every other place out there, right? So this is why we had created multiple files, so that every file has its own responsibility. Like for example, in variables we are just defining all the variables out there. In resets, it's just all about resets, so that later on if you want to add one more reset, we don't have a single file wherein we have to just figure out like CSS, right? So, I mean, typically people will also create just one CSS file. We do create multiple also over there. But yeah, the point is not to clutter one particular file with all the things that are happening all over the place in your project, but rather have different files having different responsibilities, so that it's very easy to debug things. It's very easy to add or remove certain things based on the change of requirements in future. And then the color. Basically, I'm saying that font family, apply this particular font family on all the elements which are to be there in the body tag, and then this is the color that needs to be picked up, the color black by default. And then once we add different things, we will be going ahead and changing their colors. Okay, so we are done with these three files that we have added, right? Inside abstracts, we have added variables, base, we have added reset and typography. Let me just go ahead and quickly add a couple of more files. Input and slider is something we'll be working. Okay. And as I mentioned, in the SCSS folder, you'll typically be having um, different folders, each having different files depending on the responsibilities. Okay, so as I mentioned, there'll be like there are typically 7 folders, but they can grow as per your application needs. They can also not be 7. There can be less than 7 folders, again depending on your requirements. So yeah, and one file is basically meant to just import everything out there. Okay, so these two are the ones that we'll be creating shortly. Let me just create a components folder. Okay, and inside this we'll be creating 2 files, input.scss and one is slider. So if you would have noticed, right, if you had noticed over here, basically we are having this input box and we are having this slider. So what I'm saying is have a components folder inside which we'll be having different components. For example, input is one of my components, and then slider is one of my components. When later we'll be adding graph, we'll be having graph also as one of the components. So that all these styles which are related to this, right, will actually go inside input and slider files. Okay, so then we have components, and then let's also just go ahead and add a pages folder. Okay, so inside this SCSS, I'll have a pages folder also. And inside the pages folder, we'll be having an EMI.scss file. All of these files are empty. So right now we don't have an input component, we don't have a slider component, but we are going to build them. And we don't have an EMI page as of now. So EMI page is basically the entire page that I'm calling this as the EMI page. All the styles which are related to the page and not really with the components. Those are the things that will actually, for example, this is not a component, right? We don't really need a text component because there'll be different kinds of text we'll be having. This kind of text, this text. Let me rather show you this one which we are building. Yeah, this is different text, this is different text. So we'll not be having different files for each text component also. So that's something that will go inside the emi.scss file. And you'll get to see more about it. So now, yeah, I think, yeah. So this is now you get to see that what we are doing is inside the main.scss file, we are importing all the different files we have created inside these folders. So inside the abstracts folder, we have variables file, base folder, we have reset, typography, components, we have input and slider, and in the pages component, we have EMI file. So our entire setup of like including this all of these files inside the SCSS main.scss file is complete. Now, if you remember what we had done initially was what we had said in the SCSS command. We had said that okay, run this as SAS package, watch for the changes inside the SCSS files. If at all you encounter any change, recompile it into CSS. And what we had said is that the source destination, source path will be scss/main.scss, and main.scss is the file where we imported all the other files. So if at all you make any change inside this file or any of the files which have been imported here, you will basically see a recompilation which will be happening, and you will get to see a main.css file being created all over again inside the CSS folder, right? So this is what is happening. So our entire setup of SAS is done. We have different files. Each file, like the architecture is looking good enough. We have different files having different responsibilities. For each component, we have a separate file. For the page specific styles, we have a file, and all of them are imported into main.scss. I hope this setup is clear to all of you. Let me just see if there are any comments. Okay, there are a lot of comments. I'll have to just give me some time. No, ma'am, it's clear. We please continue. Okay, clear. Fine. Why we use partial file? I think I had answered this question, but yeah, if at all you still have doubt, partials basically I said that if you don't I mean, if you want to import something, right? So, for example, at present, we are using, uh, where is this? Yeah. So, at present, what we are doing is we are having this main.scss file, which is importing all of these files. Now, if you see all of these files, do not, I mean, these partials basically, they don't really have any CSS code as such. But I think in input and slider, we'll be having some code. Okay. So, yeah, those partial files are basically the ones which can be imported into other different files. Okay. Um, we know only a few things about coding anyway. This session will be great for us. By this, we can do further. Yeah, that is something, Swati, I really recommend you doing because I knew that, I mean, I was told that most of you would be familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That's why we did not plan a really theoretical session, right? So we basically wanted to focus this session on hands-on coding and the practical aspects because that's something which will actually give you a purpose that okay, this thing is doing this, I mean, using this thing, this will happen, and that's why you get to see the advantage of actually using that particular thing, right? But yeah, if you are having any challenge with respect to understanding a couple of things, I really recommend you just having a pen and paper with yourself and then just noting things down that these are my doubts, and later on I'll just Google them out. And if Google also doesn't help you, I think I'm already there for you, right? Just connect with me, just send me a message, and I hope I'll be able to answer your doubts. If I want to display in my own way, I don't really get the question. Uh, no, Adi, I'm sorry if you can just uh, tell me what exactly your question is. Sure. I'll just, okay, my LinkedIn ID, it's something that I'll just put down at the very end, okay, so that it just doesn't get lost. Or else I'll just tell the organizer to share it with all of you. Uh, okay, all right. We don't have any more comments. Let's just get into this. Uh, right, so we have a lot of things to cover. I think we are actually running a bit late. Okay. So now that everything is like really set up, let me just see if I have any more things to cover. I don't think we have. Sure, I think we have one more thing to cover, which is basically the scripts. Okay, so now, I mean, the HTML and the CSS part is done. The CSS is not basically CSS, but rather we are using the CSS preprocessor SAS over here. However, we have not done any setup with respect to the scripts in the sense, the JavaScript part, right? So that's when I'll go ahead and create a scripts folder wherein all my JavaScript code will reside. And inside it, let's say that I have an index.js file, okay, and this index.js file, I mean, it will have all the JavaScript code inside it, and this is something which I need to basically just refer inside my HTML code. Okay, so let me just add a script tag. Okay, and inside the script, I'll basically say src. The source is basically nothing but scripts slash index.js. Okay, so now let's say that I want to print hello on the console. Okay, and let's see if that's getting printed. Let me just put it down. Right, so hello is getting printed, right? So if I print, let's say Srishti here, okay, so yeah, you get to see Srishti over here. So that means our script is also now connected with our HTML document. Okay, so whatever code that we'll be writing here will actually be picked up in our application. So let me just close this. So our entire setup of having the HTML, CSS, rather SAS in this case, and the JavaScript code is done. Now what we have to now is the actual part which we'll be going through. How exactly do we make this, right? So let's just go ahead. So the first thing that you should be doing is basically just to have a layout in mind. Okay, let me discuss those things with you because solving the problem is rather a bigger challenge than to write code. Okay, once you have understood, okay, this is the way that I want to go ahead with. you don't really face a lot of problems with writing code because it's just syntax in the end. So let's just see what are the different HTML elements we can utilize in order to make this, and then we'll improvise on top of it. Okay. So the first thing is that this is the body. Okay, and inside this I have this card like structure, or rather a card itself, and inside this card is where like all of the different elements are being projected. So the first thing is that you basically have so just if you just look at it this way, you see that this is one particular line. Okay, when I say line, I'm basically trying to say that this is one particular block, and this block basically consists of this uh, text. Okay, this label out here, as well as this input element. Okay, this text box basically, and then below this you have a slider, and the same thing happens three times. Like you have again another block where on the extreme left you have the label, on the extreme right you have the input box, below that you have a slider. The same thing happens for interest rate. At the end you have another block wherein on the extreme left you have just the constant text EMI, and on the right side you have the actual EMI, which is getting calculated based on the different inputs that you'll be providing, right? So this is like the breakdown of the HTML that you get to see on your maybe on your wireframes, and that is what you have to just distill out in your code. Okay, so right, let's just go ahead and what I will do is, because we are anyways running out of time, so I'll be pasting like very very small snippets right here. Okay, and I will be explaining why exactly have we written those lines of code and what is it that they are doing, because the purpose is to understand things, right? So let me just go bit by bit. If you feel that there is something which is not really understandable, just feel free to shoot out a comment for me in like in your YouTube, right? And we'll take those comments. Yeah, and also very important, very very important. Just write all your doubts as notes. Okay, so even if you are not getting a chance to like shoot out a lot of comments and spam the comment box with a lot of your doubts, which you should rather do, but if you're not really comfortable doing that, please note them down for your own reference, or for just sharing it with me on a one-on-one basis later on. Okay, so right, the first thing that we will be doing is this one. So let's have a main section. Okay, so instead of this, what I will do is I'll have a main semantic HTML. Basically, this just helps in accessibility. Accessibility is one of the keywords that you can note down and you can read a lot more about it. So yeah, this is called semantic HTML element. These were introduced in HTML5, and these basically provide a structure to your HTML document. Okay, so that it can be like really helpful uh, for the people who have some disabilities, and can also, I mean, not just for that, but it also helps in search engine optimization, right? So now what we will do here is that, now if you see, I've created a class over here, and I'm saying that the class is EMI Calculator. Let's just go ahead and create that particular class. Okay, so now this EMI Calculator, because it's something which is related to EMI page, right? It's not any element, it's not something which should go inside any other file. So we know that this actually should go inside the emi.scss. Okay, so I have this EMI Calculator class, which basically says that, okay, the width should be 95%. So if you have seen, let me just copy it over here. So yeah, if you get to see here, this what it is doing is it's basically creating this card, and this card is positioned right in the center, both horizontally as well as vertically. So if you just expand this, you can see that this is being positioned in the center. So this main class that we have, EMI Calculator, this is what it is doing basically. Okay, and if you have this, where are we using that? Okay, so this is the card that we are making, right? Okay, and this because basically it doesn't have any content here, that's why you get to see it as plain boring white. but yeah, it will have some content in future. So basically we are saying that the width should be 95%, but the maximum width. So if you have a very small screen size, this is how responsiveness is being played over here. So if you have a very small screen size, then it will be 95%. But yeah, if you have a large screen size, then the maximum width that will be taken will be 30 rem. Okay, and rem is yet another css unit that you can use. Basically, you would have seen pixels out there, right? Something called as px, right? So this is like an absolute unit. Rem is basically a relative unit, which depends on what is the font size which is given. I mean the root font size which your document is having, right? So if you would have seen in the mobile phones, like when you go with your settings and you basically have different options to choose for the font size, you basically say whether my font size should be small or large or extra large or extra small, right? Things like that. So similar things you have in your browser also. Okay. So yeah, I mean, typically the font size is 16 pixel, but yeah, that is something that you can play around with and you can change it. So this is basically with respect to that root font size that you would have defined for your browser. Okay, just read a bit more if at all you don't know about it. This is also another interesting part that you can read more about. What's the difference between pixel, EM, REM, percentage values? Okay, so this is one thing that you can note. Right. So we are saying that, I mean, this code is basically doing nothing, but it's just rendering a card. It's providing some box shadow to it. You can see that these are the variables we had defined, right? So this dollar is basically a variable that we had defined in our code. Similarly, this border radius curve is a variable that we had defined in our code. Okay, so these are the different variables that we are using, and we are saying that render this box like card-like structure, right? And these are the properties that we will typically be using in order to make this particular element go out of the document flow and basically be rendered in the middle of the page. Okay, that is something that you can remember. Yeah, right. So I think this is all clear. Border radius is basically giving these rounded corners that you see. And yeah, box shadow, as I said, this shadow that you get to see, right? It's very subtle for you to see, but yeah, I mean, if you are able to see it, for example, let me just go ahead and play around with it. I think you'll be able to understand better. Yeah, let's say that I give this box shadow. Um, let's say that the Y offset is 10 pixels. Okay. I think we are using dark shadow over there. So let me just reset this. Let's give 10 pixels over here. Okay, so you get to see a different shadow over here. So that's what box shadow is all about. Okay, so let me just reset it. I think you were able to see the difference. Yeah, right. Great. Let's just go ahead with our different other elements that we have to put in our code. Okay. So next is actually the section element. So let me put that first. Yes, and inside the main element, we have, again, this is a semantic HTML element. It basically just provides a particular section, okay, in your code. And right, so all of these things, you may be wondering that this could have been achieved using div also. That is actually correct. But as I mentioned, these semantic HTML elements help you in accessibility as well as they help you in search engine optimization. Okay, so that is the reason why we are using them over here. So this is where my sliders will start, and we basically have EMI input section. I don't think we have a class for this, so we can actually rather just remove this. Okay, and we have input sliders. So this is something that you'll get to see later on why we are giving margin bottom. So margin bottom is basically saying that just, I mean, after this EMI, you get to see some space over here, right? No, sorry. After all of these things, you get to see the space in between, right? So that is what we are saying, that margin bottom should be 3 REM. Okay, great. So okay, and this is where the interesting part actually starts. We have input sliders in place. Yes, we have. So now is where my principle will start. Okay, I think this is the right one that I'm copying. Okay, Great. So, all right. So this is the first part where you get to see one slider corresponding to your input element. You get to see the loan amount, you get to see an input type equal to number, and you get to see the slider, right? So let me just tell you what exactly are we doing over here. And this doesn't really look the way that we want it to look, but yeah, that is something that we'll be changing with our. Let us see what exactly are we doing. As I mentioned, this is one block for me. Okay, this particular thing where we have this loan amount and this input box. That is why we have wrapped this loan amount and this input type text inside this document, because this I'm assuming that this is my one block, and then what I have to do is I have to position this to the extreme left, this to the extreme right. That is something that we'll be doing with this checkbox. We'll see how exactly do it. The next block element is actually a slider, and in HTML you basically also have this input type range, which gives you this particular slider value. Okay, and these are a couple of values that we are saying that okay, minimum value for this slider will be 0. I mean, I can drag it to 0. Then the maximum value that it will represent is, let's say, 10 crores. 10 crores is the maximum loan that I can take basically. And each step, like when I'm dragging it, right? So each step will be 20,000. So if I go ahead and show you over here, right? So when, for example, I think with tenure you will be able to see it better. For tenure, the minimum value is 0, which you get to see here. The maximum value is 10, which you get to see here. And step value that we were talking about, right? This is step. Like with each drag, what is the step that this tenure is taking? So if I drag it once, the step is 1. Okay, so like it's getting incremented or decremented by the absolute value 1. That is what I'm saying. Okay. Similarly, for loan amount, what we have said is that the minimum value is 0, the maximum value is 10 crores, okay, and the step is 20,000. So I think it will be hard for you to see this, but yeah, if I drag it, you'll basically see that the step value is 20,000, right? So every time it's getting decremented or incremented by 20,000. This is the value that you have to see. Okay, so that is what I'm saying. So similarly, what we will do is let's first try to um, have all these three different elements in place, and then we'll be playing around with its CSS. Okay. So let's say that for the tenure also, it's basically the same thing. Okay. So our principal actually, let me just write a comment so that you are able to see it well. Principal ends here. Okay. It's with HTML, I believe that you should really be writing comments, because that's what actually helps you to just segregate different pieces out there. Otherwise, it just becomes so much nested that you yourself lose a track of what exactly was this particular thing doing, or especially when you're debugging, right? So it just becomes easier that, okay, if I have a problem in tenure, then I have to look for this particular section and not really travel through all the nested elements in place. So yeah, tenure, again, the same thing. We apply those same CSS classes. These are the classes that we are going to apply styles to, so that it looks this way, right? That is something that we'll do. Again, we are having one block element which encompasses a tenure as the text as well as the input text box. And then we have another block element in which we have this slider going on. Great. Uh, then next thing that we have is basically the same thing that you have to copy, okay, and the same thing that you have to paste, which is for interest rate. Again, the interest rate, the only thing that's really changing is the step value. So if you see, for this particular thing, we had the step as 20,000 rupees for the principal or the loan amount, and for tenure we have the step as 1, right? So the step is 1, the minimum value is 0, and maximum value is 10, saying that okay, 0 is the minimum number of years you can take loan for, and 10 is the maximum number of years you can take it for. And then the interest rate is having the step as 0.1, saying that minimum rate of interest that's applicable on a loan is 5%, the maximum is 15%, and you can basically step at 0.1. Okay, so for example, if I'm taking a loan for 5 lakhs, right, so the minimum rate of interest that I can take is 5%, the maximum is 15%, and you can basically step at 0.1. Okay, so for example, if I'm taking a loan for 5 lakhs, right, so the minimum rate of interest that I can take is 5%, the maximum is 15%, and you can basically step at 0.1. Okay, so for example, if I'm dragging it, right? So you get to see 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.5, 9.7, just because, yeah, 9.8, right? So this is the step value. Okay, right. So now that we have our HTML structure in place, and I'll just say that my sliders actually end over here. Okay, and this, the last thing that we need in our HTML document is basically this EMI. Okay, so this EMI is also something that I'll just paste after the sliders. So this EMI is basically, again, as I said, it's one particular block which has the EMI text, and then the second is the EMI value, which will be empty because we are going to inject a dynamic value over here using JavaScript code. Okay, so this is our HTML structure. Now we have to beautify it. So we have to go to our EMI CSS file, and here we have to apply some styles. Let me just put all of these styles in place. Okay, and then we'll go through each of those styles. Okay, also, because now that we have injected our inputs as well as sliders, we will actually be utilizing our components folder where we have inputs, right? Don't just worry about it. I'll be going through each and every file. Okay, so don't worry about all of this dumped code. Okay, so there are three files that we have touched. Index.html is something that we have already covered. This basically doesn't consist anything but the different HTML elements that we have. And right now you see this breaking. That is something which is happening because we don't have JavaScript code as of now, right? Once we have it, this will not break. Okay, so you get to see this positioned at the same place, right, in the middle, because that's something which is being provided by default. That is something that we have to change dynamically as per our requirements. So we have to make this appear over here. That is something we'll do using JavaScript. So don't worry about that. Okay, so index.html, clear. EMI.scss, we had already covered something. We had already covered till here. The next set of things that we have to cover is input sliders. Now, input sliders is basically all of this thing over here, right? So all of this is input sliders. So what I'm saying is input sliders. I think I copied it twice. So yeah, this is something we have gone through, right? These two things. Input sliders, my margin bottom was nothing but this space right here. That was this. Now input slider, not last of type. So this is basically a pseudo element. Okay, read more about what different pseudo elements are, what different pseudo classes are. Okay, so what here we are saying is input slider. Just let's see what exactly is input slider. Okay, so this div right here, like this div, this entire div, which consists of loan amount as well as this slider. Okay, so this thing over here, this entire thing over here, that is my uh, input slider. Okay, so what I'm saying is this input slider, except the last element. Okay, so that should have margin bottom as 2 rem. So I'm saying that after this input slider, right, you get to see this margin over here. You get to see some space after the slider and before the label of the second input, right? So after the slider and before the label, you get to see some space. That space is coming from margin bottom 2 rem. And why we are saying that the last element should not be included, because anyways we have given margin 3 rem to this. Okay, so we have already said that after all of this ends, you give a margin bottom of 3 rem. That is why we don't want to provide this particular thing. So if I just remove this, okay, let's just remove this. So you'll see more space being added over here, like two more REMs are being added over here. Okay, right. Let me see. Yeah, it's getting compiled. Okay, next is slider info and EMI result. Uh, right, slider info. Let's just check what exactly it is. Slider info is nothing but this particular thing, the loan amount as well as the input box. Okay, so that is slider info. And we are basically saying that display it as flex, because as I just mentioned, we want to move this thing to the extreme left and this thing to the extreme right. So for that, we'll say space between and then align items vertically to the center. Okay. Next is slider info. Flexbox is something that you should definitely know about. Okay, that grid layout and flexbox is something that are like must to know in CSS. If you don't know it already, please do know them. Okay, slider info is something. Yeah, slider info is basically no, slider info is something that we've already covered, right? Yeah, so basically we're saying that slider info as well as EMI result, these both will be having display flex, because EMI result is nothing but this particular component. So for this also we want to say that okay, push this one to the extreme left, this one to the extreme right. So that is where we are using code. I mean, we are reusing this particular code. So we are combining both of these classes using a comma. So we are saying that for both of these classes, just apply these three CSS rules. And for slider info alone, we are saying that margin bottom should be zero point 0.7 rem. So this is this margin bottom right here, after the loan amount and before the slider, after the label, before the slider. The previous one that we discussed was after the slider and before the label. So there's a difference. So next is principal input, tenure input, interest rate input. So all these three classes, which is nothing but this text box over here. So all of these should be having text aligned, like they should be pushed to the end, right? The font, the text should be pushed to the end, right? So if you see, if I type something over here, you see that the text is already at the end. The text itself is on the right side. That's what this is doing. The font size, the color that we are providing. So this color that you see, if I write primary over here, okay, so it will give it some blue color or something. Yeah, so I mean I have to type something, right? So yeah, so this is color secondary, then the font weight is bold, and the border bottom, basically this line that you see over here, that is coming from border bottom. Okay, right? So for principal input, because it will be a bigger input, that is why we are saying that the width should be 7 rem. For tenure, because it's a smaller input, we say that the width is 2, and for interest rate, again we say that it should be 2. Okay, so here that you see that this is bigger, loan is bigger, these two are similar width. So that's what it's happening. In fact, you could have just combined this two. You don't have to write it separately. Okay, so this is how we can combine both of them together to say that the width should be 2 rem. Next is principal slider. Now we come to the slider part. Okay, so these sliders, now how exactly are these getting displayed? But before really moving on to sliders, we should actually go ahead and check what is it that we have applied to the input inside the input file for the input element. Okay, so that would be border would be none, because if you don't apply the, if you don't provide this, right, so you will see that the border will actually be applied, and that kind of looks ugly, right? So that's why you want to say that the default border should not be applied, the outline should be none. So when you like navigate through the through your keyboard, so then there will be no outline which will be applied, right? Font family inherit from your parent, font size also inherit from your parent. Like we are saying to the input box that inherit font family and font size from your parent element. Okay, so the parent element would be the div in this case, and then the div itself would inherit from its parent. So all of that will just trace down to the body element, to which we have provided the font family as something, right? So in the inside typography, if you remember, um, to this body element, we have provided font family as font family base variable, and this variable has font family base variable has this particular value. So that means the input text box will at the end inherit this particular value. Okay, and then the last thing is that the padding should be from top and bottom, like just apply this particular padding. So you see that the cursor is not really touching the border, right? So that's because we have applied some padding on the top and bottom side. Okay. Okay, so we've covered this. Now what we need to cover is basically the slider, right? And the slider.scss file, right? So I think you should not be feeling left out, because we are anyways discussing all of the properties. Let me just check if there are any comments. I think if at all you have some commitments, I think we'll be maybe overshooting by 15 minutes, not really sure, but I think we are actually running out of time. Um, just focus later. You can watch recordings and do parallelly. I don't think we have any question as a comment. Yeah, so I have this comment, right? From where is it? No, Adi. Basically, you are concerned about it's taking too much time. Yeah, so I like just let me know because I thought that because I'm dumping code, so it makes sense that I actually explain to you different properties. So I'm just covering a bit overview of those properties, not really going into depth. But yeah, if you are feeling that it's taking a lot of time, maybe you can just watch it later by fast forwarding the YouTube video. I think that will help. Okay. Yeah, Swati, you can definitely ask about your doubts. You can just paste them over here in the comment section itself. Great. So you don't have any comments. Let's just head back to our code. Okay. And here you get to see this, right? Great. So we are yet to cover the sliders, and I mean after this we'll just be left with the JavaScript code. Okay, so that's when I'm saying that I think we'll be shooting time with 15 minutes. So principal slider. Okay, so now we are talking about the different sliders and these sliders, right? So first of all, let's just see that what exactly have we provided inside this slider code. So if you see the slider, okay, so we have two classes applied to each slider. One is the slider itself and the other is tenure slider. And you may also be wondering that why do we have slider file inside this slider.scss file and then the principal slider inside emi.scss file. Now this is where it basically just boils down to how exactly do you want your code to be structured, because slider, like these all properties that are written inside the slider.scss file, these properties I want every slider in my entire project. I mean, if at all I'll later on add some more sliders, I want these properties to be inherited by every slider in my project. So those are the properties that I will be providing inside my slider.scss file because it's a part of a component, right? However, the other class, which is principal slider, now this is just specific to this principal. This is just specific to this principal slider. Okay, the tenure slider class is just specific rules which are applicable to the tenure slider. That is why I have put them inside the emi.scss file, because these properties are just specific to this EMI page and the sliders on this particular page. And I don't want these properties to be applied on other sliders on different pages inside my application. For those sliders, I just want these properties to be inherited. That is why you see, I mean, the different classes being written inside different files. And the same thing, if you would have noted, we had done with input also. So for input, we had basically one file which is inside components, and this had just a couple of CSS rules which I want every input in my entire project to inherit these rules, right? But the other classes that we had written inside the EMI, right? EMI.scss. So those basically this principal input, tenure input. So those are the specific, because I don't want every input to be with 2 rem. I don't want every input to be with 7 rem, right? So that is something which is very specific to these inputs or the inputs on this particular page. That is why we have kept them inside emi.scss file. I hope that actually, if at all you had this doubt, I hope that clears. So yeah, principal slider, we are basically saying that the background, now inside the background, you can give colors. For example, you can say red, so it will give the background as red. However, you can also provide linear gradients. So now if you see here, this that one is breaking because we don't have JavaScript applied to it yet. But if you see, this is kind of a linear gradient, right? You have one color which is blue on the left side, and then you have another color which is gray on the right side. Similar thing is for all these sliders out there, right? So that is what linear gradient will help you achieve. So if at all you have two different colors going on, so I mean, not just two, it can be multiple colors. But yeah, if you want to play around with multiple colors, that is when you use linear gradient, and that is something you can provide as a value to the background CSS property. Okay, so we are saying, now what exactly are we saying here? What do these things mean? Okay, so what we are saying is, the gradient should move to the right side. Okay, so we say that these are the colors which will be applied on the left. These are the colors which will be applied on the right. So you say that the primary color, which is the blue color, starts from 0 to 10%. So this slider, right? So this entire slider is 100%. 0 to 10 is this from this particular value. So you say that, okay, blue color, apply blue color on my slider from 0% to 10% towards the right side, and then from 10% to 100% apply the gray color. So from 10 to 100 apply the gray color, right? So that is what it is saying. Similarly, for tenure slider, you are saying that the primary color apply from 0 to 70%, and for I mean, the primary color should go from 0 to 70%, and the light gray color should go from 70 to 100%. Now you may be wondering, where exactly did we derive these values from? Like, why 10% here, why 70% here, and why 35% here? That is because if you look at what is it that we are supposed to build, so what we are saying inside here, we are pre-populating our page with some default values, right? So for in like this, can maximum it can go to 10 crores, but we are pre-populating it with 1 crore. Now 1 crore is 10% of 10 crores, right? So that is why we are saying that fill the slider 10% by this value, and then we in JavaScript code we will also be pre-populating this particular value with 1 crore, which is not happening right now. Right now this is empty, but with JavaScript we'll be setting it, and we will be setting this particular thing also, right? The uh, what do we call it, the thumb basically. Okay, and similarly we are saying that 70%. Now how exactly 70% is coming? Because this tenure can go to a maximum of 10, right? And the pre-populated value is 7, so 7 is 70% of 10. Similarly 8.5, so that is basically 35% of the maximum value, which is 15. Okay, so that is why we are providing these particular values. You can change these values according to you. So if you decide that, okay, my value here should be 5 crores, 5 crores should be my default value. So here instead of 10%, you will be saying 50%, correct? So for here also, let's say if your value is, let's say 1, so you want to provide 1 as the tenure, default tenure. Okay, so that is 10% of 100. So here you will get, here you should write 10% at both the places. Okay, so you say 0 to 10% is my primary color, and then 10 to 100% is my secondary, sorry, the gray, light gray color basically. I hope this just clears out. Let's go to the slider. What are the default slider CSS rules that we have applied? Okay, so here we are basically saying that the appearance, the webkit, so this is like a vendor prefix. Just search more about what vendor prefixes are and why do we need to provide them. So we are saying that the default appearance should be none, and that is the reason why we are not getting that default green colored slider, right? So because we want that our custom style should be applied, and we say that the width should be 100% of the container basically, of the parent basically. The height should be 0.45 rem, like what should be the height of this slider. Okay, so this is like very small height, right? And then the border radius should be 2 rem. You also see rounded corners for each slider. That's what border radius is giving. And the transition, so I mean, here you see some transitions happening, right? So once you hover on it, basically the opacity is getting changed. Okay, so that's what it is. And then these are the styles that you apply to this particular thumb, because this thumb, if you had just paid attention earlier, this thumb was really different when we had the default values. So for example, if I just comment this out, okay, you will get to see how exactly the thumb looks like. So this is the default thumb, but we don't want to have this particular thumb, but rather we want to customize that thumb also. So for that, you will be using these different properties. This is basically the different vendor prefixes that you are adding for different browsers, right? So in case of in case of Chrome, that is what WebKit is about. So in case of Google Chrome, you say that the appearance should be none, right? And I mean, just see what vendor prefixes are, so you'll get to know why we need to provide these two different properties. And then what should be the width, height, border radius, similar things. And then the box shadow. So this thing that you get to see over here, right? So this is another thing that we can do with box shadow. This white colored rounded space that you get to see. So this is not really border, but it's rather coming from the box shadow. Okay, and this outline that you see, the blue colored outline after the white colored space, that is also something which is coming from box shadow. So this is what is responsible. And similarly for Mozilla, which I mean the Firefox browser, for that also you have I mean for that also you provide pretty much the similar thing, so that it works on Firefox as well. Okay, so that's all about the CSS code. I think we are done with CSS. Now all that we is left is actually JavaScript, and that is something that we have to do now. So, and we are definitely going to take 15 more minutes after the scheduled time. Okay, so let me just check if there are any comments until now. Able to fill the feedback. Okay, I don't think I have any comment for myself. Maybe some more for the organizers. Great. So let me just close everything. Okay, and what we need to do is we need to have all the scripts in place now. Okay, so we had index.js file. So let me just first of all put things uh, inside the utils. So now utils, I mean, it's a folder where you can put all your helper functions, all your constants, so that they can be utilized at different places. Okay, let me just have some contents inside this so that you will be able to understand why I'm making this particular folder. And then we have UI constants also. This is actually the exciting part. So because here is where we'll be actually going ahead and just playing around with the logic, right? So this is something that you should be enjoying, in my opinion, right? So this is UI helpers.mjs. I think we did a good job by just dumping code. Otherwise, we wouldn't have covered this much also. Okay, and then we have this. Okay, so inside helpers, let me just quickly, this is like really simple. Okay, shouldn't be much of an issue. So this is my helpers file, and what I'm doing is if you would have just paid attention, instead of JS extension, we are instead using MJS extension. So that's basically converting this JavaScript file into a module. Module is something which is I mean, it's more uh, this is basically something that you are saying that okay, this particular file is a module, and this module is basically like a particular piece of code which gets exported, and then you can just require it in some other file. So I have a blog post already written on what how modules work and what is exactly the difference between modules and I mean module exports and require. I think on Medium, if you just check that out, you will be able to find it. uh, right. So that is something that you can check more about what exactly are modules, and hence we are using this particular extension, right? So now here I have different functions which are being written. Why I've written them inside helpers file? Because these are the common functions that can be used across the application. Right now, I'm just having this particular page, but these functions are so generic that maybe at some other place also I may be requiring these functions, and that is why I've written them in a separate file so that these can be imported as and when required at different places inside my application. Okay, so the first function is get months from tenure. Okay, let's just go ahead with get total interest, right? So this is something that we discussed about. Simple interest is nothing but principal into rate into the time period divided by 100, right? So P into R into T divided by 100. So this is what we are doing. So get total interest is a function that gets three arguments: principal, tenure, and rate. And this is nothing but because whenever we are getting values from the text boxes, right, those values actually come as strings. So those values come as I mean, the data type of them will be strings because they are coming from the text boxes. Whatever you inject inside a text box, that's also a string. When you get value from it, that's also a string. So because you want to perform mathematical operations, you want to typecast this string into a number. In JavaScript, this is the way, this is the shortest possible way where you can just parse a string to a number. You just prepend it with a plus sign. Okay. So this means that the principal is now a number principal, I mean, the principal value in number type. Tenure is again because it's a numeric value, you want to typecast it to a number, and similar thing is the rate of interest because here you are performing a mathematical operation. So mathematical operation cannot be performed on string data type, right? You need a number data type for that. So what you are simply doing is you're saying P into R into T, divide, instead of divide by 100, you are just saying that multiplied by 0.01. So this is the formula for simple interest, right? So that is what get total interest is doing. Now we need to calculate the EMI. So as we discussed earlier, EMI is nothing but the total amount, right? So this EMI function will also receive three inputs: principal, tenure, and rate. You will be typecasting them to number. And because let's just come to this later. Okay, just focus on this particular part. So get total interest. I mean, first of all, you will calculate what is the total simple interest which is being applied from this particular function. So that you calculate inside, that is being caught inside the total interest variable. And the amount is nothing but the principal plus the total interest that you have to pay, right? So this is the amount, P plus SI, which is simple interest. Okay, so once you have the amount, you basically want to divide it by, I think we already had this, right? So if you can't recall it, so here we had discussed the formula in the very beginning, right? So EMI is nothing but amount divided by time period. And that time period is nothing but the total number of months. So if the number of years for which you take the loan is 2, so the total number of months will be 2 into 12, which will be 24. So this get months from tenure, this function takes the years as input. So for example, 2 is the value. So that, I mean, it will just return 24 out of it. So I mean, 2 years, how many months do 2 years have? This is what this function is doing. So 2 years will have 24 months. That is what it will return. Okay. So here, what you are trying to do is you are trying to divide the amount by total months in tenure. That is something that you saw over here also. And this gives you the EMI, right? So this is all about helpers. So you have different functions to calculate the total simple interest. You have different functions to as well as to calculate the number of months in given years, as well as to calculate the EMI. Okay, next I have basically the code for UI helpers over here. Now UI helpers is basically a file which will consist of different functions which are used as helper functions for just the UI related things. Okay. Now here, if you see, you get to see a rupee sign here, correct? However, you don't see rupee sign over here as well as here. This is because this is an amount. This is basically a rupee value, and the same thing over here also. This is also a rupee value. So you want this rupee to be just prefixed with this particular value, and you also want these commas to be there, right? So basically, this is Indian number system. So such that you get lakhs and crores and thousands separated out with commas. Okay, so that is what we are trying to do. So what we are saying is convert a given number to Indian currency. Okay, so for example, if the number input is 1000, so what it will do is it will put this rupee sign in for just beginning. Okay, I can't really type that sign. So let's just assume that it is R, and then it will print something like this. Okay, R 1000. So this is what this function is doing. It takes a number and then just returns the formatted number in Indian currency. So convert number to Indian currency. It takes the number and the decimal places also. For example, if you want to display with 2 decimal places, so the default value for decimal places is 0. So what you do is, because you will be performing mathematical operations, again the same thing that you do, you basically first typecast this text value or the string value to a number. That is why you have prepended it with a plus sign. And then this is a JavaScript function. This is a native function which is being provided. This basically converts a number to a locale string. So you say that English is the language and India locale is something that you want to use. The maximum fraction digits should be the decimal places that the user has provided. By default, it will be 0. So this is an optional argument. Okay, the style should be currency and the currency should be Indian national rupee. Right. So this is what this function is doing. As I said, it takes a number, it just transforms that number into a text value which has the rupee sign in the beginning and the commas injected at appropriate places based on the Indian number system, right? Next function is get number from locale string. Now, once we have this particular number, at times I also want is that what I want is that if I have, let's say, R 1000 rupees, which is a string value, what I want is I actually want to extract what is the numeric value from it. So previously we were converting from this to this. Now we want to convert from this to the numeric value. This is what this function is doing. So it's basically utilizing a regex. Regex is also something that you should know about. So regex is basically nothing but regular expressions. Here, what we are trying to do is, if at all this input locale string, if it has anything which is except 0 to 9, okay, any other character except 0 to 9, okay, or a minus or a dot, because these are the things that we'll be utilizing in a numeric value. A number can be negative, a number can have decimal points. Okay, although in this case we'll not be really having any negative value, but yeah, if you want to check for a number, basically you have to check whether it's between 0 to 9. It may be having negative uh, sign in front of it, and it can also have a dot in order to represent a decimal value. So you basically say that if at all you encounter anything apart from this, just replace it with a empty string. So for example, with in place of R, you will say replace it with empty string. In place of comma, you say replace it with empty string, and this will get converted into a number. So this is what this function is doing, right? It takes a formatted string, formatted currency string, and converts it into a number. The last function is get slider progress percentage. So basically, you also want to calculate what is the slider progress percentage from here. So for example, if this slider goes from, let's say, this slider was going from 5 to 10, right? So if you are at, let's say, 7.5, so the slider progress percentage would be 50%. So what I'm saying is slider starts at 5, ends at 10. This is the start value. This is the end value. Okay. And your current value is actually 7.5. Okay. So that means your slider progress percentage is 50%. So that is what this is calculating. So basically you subtract the minimum value from the current value and divide it by max minus min. Okay, so just take an example. The similar example that I've taken, I think you'll be able to understand. Okay, so this is what UI helpers is about. We have also covered helpers inside UI constants. We just don't have a lot of things going on here, but we just have different constant values. Okay, so for example, the primary color, this is the same color that we had given in our variables file also, which I can just show it to you. 1D 9DA7, right? So 1D and 9DA7, and the gray light color, because these are the colors that we'll be utilizing inside a JavaScript files. Hence, we needed to provide them as constants inside UI constants file. Okay, and then the slider defaults. So for slider, as I mentioned earlier, this was something which was breaking, right? Because everything was at 50%. This thumb was 50%. Now what we are trying to do is we are providing the minimum and the maximum values, which is the same that we have provided in the HTML code also. The step also remains the same. And the value is something that we are providing, that this should be 1 crore by default. The tenure should be 7 by default, which you can see here. Let me just reload. Right, so this should be 7 by default, and the value of this should be 8.5. Okay, so these are the different defaults that we are providing, and this is the last part. So this is the last part that we are going to cover, and that is going to take up some amount of time, but yeah, it will definitely be very, very interesting. And this is the entire code that we have. Once you refresh this, you will get to see that um, 1 second. I think this, uh, just give me a second. Inputting it correctly, we are index.js. I think we have included this, right? me a second. This is also very slow. We have everything in place. You just give me 2 minutes. If at all till it's breaking, I'll just figure it out. And I mean the repo should not really break for you, right? Cannot use statement outside a module. Okay, because have we exported it? Here is where it is actually breaking, right? Uh, oh, okay, I got it. We don't really have to convert this, but rather what I have to really do is like just give me one minute. I know where the problem is. Hmm, I know. Okay. So when we are attaching this script, right? So we are just attaching it like a regular JavaScript file, but rather we have to say that the type is module. Okay, so now if you see the error is actually gone, and then we are able to get the exact same result as we wanted, right? So this, so basically what we were instead doing was we were trying to inject a regular JavaScript file, but right now what we have done is, because as I mentioned earlier, these are different modules, right? And this is what you can read about later on. What are different modules? I mean, what exactly is a module in JavaScript? And this actually fixes this problem. Okay, this is something we had forgot earlier because we didn't really needed this. Right. So now let me just quickly walk you through the different things that we are doing here. Okay. And this should be really, really simple. The first thing that we want to do is we are adding an event listener on the window object, which is the global object. And when the window loads, so this line of code, right? This, what it is doing is it's, I mean, on this CRP side, it means a different thing, right? On the critical rendering path side, it means a different thing, but I'll not rather cover that. But I'll just tell you that in simple words, it's what it is doing is it is attaching an event listener saying that when the window is loaded, just call this init app event handler. Event handler is nothing but a function which is executed when this event happens. So when the window is ready to be loaded, when everything has been fetched, right? When all the scripts and everything have been fetched, when this HTML document is ready to be loaded after the DOM elements have been injected, the CSS has been applied, that is when this init app function is getting fired as an event handler. And this init app function, it basically calls four different methods. The first method is get DOM elements. The second is set input and slider default values, which basically sets the default values for input and slider. Next is attach all the event listeners, the different event listeners on slider seek and everything. And then the last thing is show results. Show results is nothing but show this particular result, which what is the final EMI that is to be calculated. We will just cover it within 10 minutes. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, just bear with me for 10 more minutes. This will be really exciting. So let's first go ahead and see what get DOM elements is doing. Before that, we also have a variable which is loan DOM elements, which has two keys. One is input and the other is slider. Okay, this is something that we'll be using inside this get DOM elements. Now this method, right? This method is doing nothing, but it is trying to get these input elements and it is trying to get these slider elements. So for in input elements, what you're doing is you are injecting inside the loan DOM elements, right, into to the input key. You are saying that the principal value should be the element which is having this particular ID, principal input. So if you had seen earlier, if you had just paid attention to this, this principal input, right? So this input type text which we have here, this is basically having the ID principal input. That is what we are trying to access over here. And this loan DOM elements dot input dot principal will basically be nothing but this DOM element, this input element. Okay. Similarly, dot input dot tenure. So we are saying on loan DOM elements inside the input key, the tenure key should be this particular DOM element, this DOM element which is for tenure, the input box. Okay, the similarly for rate also we get this input element which is for rate of interest. Similarly, we get the slider elements also. Now on slider, if you had seen, on each slider we are also having an ID property. For principal slider we are having principal slider as the ID. For tenure slider we are having tenure slider as the ID, and same is what we are accessing over here to get the different DOM elements. So we are saying the loan DOM elements, inside the loan DOM elements on the slider key, attach this key which is the principal and get this particular element which is get this element, this slider element from DOM, right, as this particular key to be attached on slider. Similarly, get this slider element also and this slider element also. Now, you may be wondering why exactly are we just trying to access these different DOM elements. This is because when you are seeking the slider, right, so you want access to this input element so that you can update the value over there. Okay, so that is why you want the access to this slider element also, so that you can listen to changes on this, and you want access to this input element also so that you can project updated changes on it. Okay, so that is what this function is doing. And the next function, if you look at init app, the next function is set input and slider default values. Okay, so this, if you had we noticed it quite a considerable number of times that this was breaking, right? So everything was just at 50%. The thumb for every slider was at 50%. Now it's being shown properly. This is because this function is actually doing the magic. Okay, so if you go here, you are basically setting the slider defaults and the principal and slider values. So let's just see what exactly is happening here. So first of all, you are getting all the default values. So you remember that we had this UI constants file where we had different defaults, right? For principal, we had min, max, step, and value. So that is the same thing that you're trying to access over here. Okay, so you have principal, tenure, and rate as different objects over here. And then what you are trying to do is on the formatted principal value, what you are trying to do is you're basically converting it a number to Indian currency. Because as you remember, uh, what we are trying to do is here we have to just project a value which has the rupee symbol, and it has proper commas at proper places. I mean, commas at different places, right, based on the Indian number system. So on this input we need to display a formatted input, but on the rest of the inputs we can just directly display the number. Okay, so that is what we are doing here. The formatted principal value is something that you get from this function. So this formatted principal value will have rupee and commas in place. And on the input element, on the principal input element, the value of it will be formatted principal value. So that means this value will be a formatted value, and the slider principal will just be the default value, because for principal you have said that the default value should be what? It should be 1 crore. So on the principal slider you set that particular value as the default, right? So that is what you are doing. Similarly, for the tenure input, you basically say that the default value of tenure is something that you want to display over here, because the default value is what? It is 7. That is what you display here. And on the slider also you display the value as the default. So on the tenure input, you display the default value, right? And on tenure slider also, you display the default value of tenure. That is what you're doing. 7 here, 7 here. Okay. Now rate of interest, 8.5 here, 8.5 on the slider. That is what you're doing. On rate input, put the default value of rate. On rate slider, put the default value of slider. That is what this function is all doing, putting the default values on the input boxes as well as on the sliders. Let's see what the next function is all about. The next function is all about attach all event listeners. Now this function, behavior wise, what this function is doing is when you are seeking the slider, right? So it's basically updating the text value. Also, it is updating the EMI. Okay, so every slider when you seek, when you change the value of each slider, that is when the corresponding text box is getting updated as well as the EMI is getting updated. So attach all event listeners basically on different elements on each slider, be it principal, tenure, or rate. You are adding an event listener which listens to the input event, and for each event, right? For principal slider, you will be attaching a principal slider seek handler event. So this, when you basically you say that whenever the input is changed on this slider, right? So call this function. So what this function is doing is it basically gets the value from here. So it basically tries to get 3,67,000. Sorry, it gets the value from the slider. So it basically gets what is the current value of the slider. So that is what principal slider value is all about. And then on this principal input box, right? Here is where it tries to, it just displays that particular value. So if this value is this value on the slider is 3 crores 67 lakhs. Okay, that is what is being displayed over here, but in a formatted manner. So that is why you are actually calling this function. Okay, so that you have the rupee as well as the comma in appropriate places. The next is you also want the slider progress to be updated, right? So when you're dragging this, you get to see that the blue color is actually changing, right? So blue color is occupying more space and the gray color is occupying less space. So that is what this update slider progress function is doing. Update slider progress, it basically takes the minimum value, the maximum value of the slider, the current value of the slider, and the slider element which needs to be updated. So here what you are saying is update the slider progress. The minimum value is the principal minimum value, which is 1 crore. The maximum value is the principal's maximum value, which is 10 crores. The principal slider value is actually 5 crores 99 lakh 60,000. That is the current value. And the slider principal is the default. It's the DOM element that you want to pass. Okay. So here you get this, and here basically you just the same function that we had discussed, right, in the UI helpers file. So that slider percentage is what we are trying to calculate. And then in the background, if you remember in the index.html file, not really in the index.html file, but rather in the emi.css file, right? So here we had something like this, right? We spent some time on this, like 0 to 10 should be blue color, and then 10 to 100 should be light gray color. Now here you want to change that because your blue color, let's say previously was here, but now when you seek the slider, your blue color actually occupies more space than the gray color. Okay, so that is what you will do here. So you will say that the background, which is this property over here, this property is what you're trying to update on the background from linear gradient to right. This is the same thing that you're trying to do here, but instead of this percentages is what you are going to change. Okay, so you say that the color primary goes from 0% to the slider progress percentage that you have calculated. That is why you wanted that value, that what is the current percentage on the slider. So from 0 to that percentage, you display the primary color, and then from this percentage to 100%, you display the gray color. I hope this is clear. This is nothing but the same thing that we are trying to replicate this thing inside JavaScript code. That is what we are doing essentially. And then the next set of methods, right? We had multiple event handlers. So again, on tenure slider, we are saying that whenever an input event is fired, execute this particular function. This particular function also doesn't do anything, but whenever the slider is being updated, it updates this value over here, as well as it updates this blue color on the slider. It just increases or decreases the blue color on the slider and does the opposite for the gray color. The similar thing happens for the interest rate also. So whenever the slider is values is being changed, it updates the text value as well as it updates the percentage of color of that should be shown for blue as well as for gray. Okay, so that's about it. The last thing is show results. Okay, once we have updated all of these things, we also want the EMI to be calculated, right? And this is the last function that we are going to look at. What it does is it basically gets the principal value, which is this value from this text box, and uh, because we are going to perform mathematical operations inside on this value. That is why we want it to be converted from this text value. Like we just want to get rid of rupee, comma, and everything of that sort. We just want a plain number. That is why we had this function which converts a text based, I mean, a currency based text into a plain number. So this is what this function is doing. We have this, we get the value of the principal in numerical format. Definitely we get the value of the tenure, we get the value of the rate, right? So we get principal, tenure, rate from these input boxes. And then we calculate the EMI, which is this get EMI function. We pass principal, tenure, and rate, which we have got from here. And we get the EMI value. Okay, remember how we are getting the EMI value? Basically, the amount divided by tenure into 12, which is the total number of months in given tenure. And this function is what we call update EMI on DOM while passing the EMI. Update EMI on DOM doesn't do really anything, but it just converts this EMI to this formatted one so that it has rupee and commas at appropriate places. So this is the formatted EMI value. And what it does is the last thing, right? On this input box, basically I had said earlier, right, that this doesn't has any value, but it just has an ID field. And later on, we'll be injecting value over here using JavaScript. That's what we are doing here. We get this element by ID, which is EMI value, the same ID that we have provided here. Okay, we get this DOM element and we just access its inner text and just put formatted EMI as the value. That's all. This is all about EMI calculator. Let me just take a pause and see if we have got any questions. Um, I don't see any questions really. Um, right, so I don't have any questions as such. But yeah, this is all about EMI calculator. I think we just went over by 2 more minutes, which I said that we'll be finishing off by 9:15, but I guess it's 9:17 right now. Yeah, right. So I hope everyone you have enjoyed it, right? So this is what we have actually built so far. And if I had to, like, I would really appreciate if you can just go ahead and create this chart as well as, so there's one more thing which I want to just show it to you. So far we have not really included the two-way binding over here. So two-way binding is nothing but, for example, if I just go ahead and click this, change this value, right? So I say 1 crores and 50 lakhs. So this doesn't get updated. However, in my original code, this actually gets updated. So if I say something like 9 crores and 99 lakhs, so you see that the slider already just went ahead, right? So for example, if I change this to 7, okay, you see that the slider is actually changing. And then the graph also got updated. Just see here, graph will get updated, right? So this is something that you can take as an exercise for you, as a practice session for you, where you implement two-way binding. Basically, you provide some value over here. The progress slider should now change. Previously, what we were doing was basis progress sliders value, we were updating this text box. Now what you have to do is you have to do the opposite. Basis this text box value, you have to update the slider. Okay, and you definitely have to add this graph. I hope this was an interesting session. The code for this entire application, along with the two-way binding and the graph that we discussed, is something which you can find here. I'll just put it. Um, how do I put it on chat? Shriram, I need your help. How
Ma'am,
do I put it in
actually,
chat?
our technical head provided it in the description of YouTube video.
Okay, great. So I think this is something that I will, Shriram, I'll just share it with you, these two links.
Sure, ma'am.
This
Sure.
basically the GitHub link, as well as I think somebody also asked my LinkedIn
Mhm.
profile in order for you to ask a couple of questions. So I'll just provide these two links to you. Maybe you can just put it in the description box of the YouTube video that's going live, right? And
Sure,
then
ma'am.
uh, friends, you will be able to access it over there, right? So I really hope you enjoyed the session. Definitely we have spilled over time, but I really hope you enjoyed
We
working on
don't
this.
feel it as an extended thing, but we really enjoyed it wholeheartedly, ma'am. Yeah,
Great,
I
great,
guess
Sriram. Thank you
we
so
had
much.
around 100 plus active viewers on the peak time, and this is In fact, indeed a captivating session, ma'am. We'd love to have
Great.
few more sessions with you in the future too.
Sure, sure. So I think this just brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Sriram. I hope you were able to enjoy this session, as well as I hope the other people who had joined were able to enjoy. Thank you so much for joining this session. It was really great to see all of you, and was also, I mean, it was a practice kind of a thing for me as well. So yeah, thank you so much, and I am hoping to just connect with you maybe on LinkedIn if you have got any questions. And just one thing, please do go ahead, because as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of this session was not you to parallelly code, but now I would really request you to just go ahead and just code it out by yourself. Whatever you've learned till now, just go ahead and code it out by yourself, so that it will be a great practice for you, and you will be able to understand a couple of things. You'll be recalling things, and if at all you don't understand any particular property or some line of code, just go ahead and Google it. You'll find plenty of resources for you to learn.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's it from my side.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for providing your valuable time and giving your knowledge and sharing your knowledge to all the people. This will be really appreciable, and we wholeheartedly thank you once again. And viewers, so as ma'am said, please practice it on your own. Please make sure that you do it by your own. Build your own calculator. Put out the results in LinkedIn and tag ma'am. She'll be so honored to do that. And yes, guys, this is it for today. I mean, to stay updated with the upcoming lectures, upcoming webinars, workshops, and informative sessions, subscribe to our channel and don't miss to forget. Don't miss anything being provided by us. Our technical head will be providing you all the links regarding our media handles. Follow them and stay updated. Yeah, that's it. This is it for today. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.